Hi everyone. Took a while to connect today. Hopefully we'll stay connected. How are you? To see you. Alan here. We'll be Discovering Buddhism class. The second in our topic of the lamrim, presenting the path. Practicing the path, I think it is. It's an overview of the path. So just a notice. We heard that Vajrayana Institute is going to open again for classes in November, 1st of November, which I think is a Monday. So I think that will mean that, all going well, we'll be having live classes at VI. But the thing is, I'm not sure whether we'll continue with the streaming classes, the YouTube classes, online classes. So I'm very happy to keep doing YouTube classes, streaming classes, either here or at the centre. And so just thought, if you've got any thoughts on that, if you prefer to keep the live streaming going, because I know some of you are probably a long way from the centre, maybe you're not even in the same city, out of Sydney. So if you, or as usual, put my email address there if you're new. But if you'd like to just think about that, and maybe during the week, just send me a message with your thoughts as to whether you'd prefer to keep the streaming classes or whether you intend to go to VI. I noticed there's a little sign saying my connection is unstable, so hopefully we'll keep going. We'll be able to reconnect. I will keep talking. Just meditation this afternoon, so you can actually download it and do it yourself at home if we get interrupted. The notice is saying they're trying to reconnect me, so I'm not sure that means that I'm totally cut off or it's just the visual that is cut. So let's just, as always, do 5 minutes of mindfulness breathing practice, mindfulness practice to calm ourselves, to settle the mind and to get in a receptive mood to do some study and meditation. All right, so get comfortable. Be sitting, we'll just do 5 minutes watching the breath. Hi Paul, good to see you there. I think we're reconnecting or have been reconnected. Okay, so now we're just coming in to our inner world. Sitting comfortably or lying down if it's more comfortable. Just spending a moment to think how fortunate we are to have this opportunity to get together and study the teachings of the Buddha, incredible teachings, and do some practice, the meditations. We're doing this not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of other beings, those around us, and living beings. So we just come into the body, making sure we're evenly balanced on the chair or the floor. Shoulders relaxed, eyes can be closed or just gazing gently in front. And just noticing the breath. It's always there, and now we're giving it our full attention. The gentle rhythm of the breath in the body. watching the breath, and we're also watching ourselves, watching the breath, monitoring, just keeping a lookout for the distractions, the wandering mind. And when we notice that wandering mind happen, we gently let it go, patiently come back to the breath. Just one breath at a time. Nothing to judge, just watch. The gentle rhythm of the breath. The full flow of the in-breath, full flow of the out-breath. Okay, just relax. Oh, good. Thanks, Paul, for that feedback. People can hear, that's good. Okay, so second class on this overview of the basic Buddhist teachings, the lamrim. So just bear in mind that this module is very introductory, and we actually come back to just about everything that's in this module. We come back to karma, the whole special subject of karma. We come back to death and death meditations and rebirth, death and rebirth. So this is just like looking at bird's eye view. Each module takes 4 weeks. And so just if you've looking at Rabina's transcript, which is excellent, but very long, I think she had something like 10 weeks, and she's, I think, covering basically the whole of the Discovering Buddhism course. So a lot of those teachings are very detailed, and it's probably a good thing to we could come back to that transcript with other modules. So don't get overwhelmed and think that just one teaches very fast, and she's obviously, I think, probably had a lot of time to cover a lot more ground than we have. So I'll refer to some of her parts of her teaching tonight and in future classes. Questions from last week. Hopefully you got the notes. First one, the 3 pots on how to listen to the teachings. Remember last week there was this, it's actually I think one of the Buddha's teachings on how our mind should be when we're listening to teachings. So using this old example of a pot, if our mind is the receptacle listening, using this old example of a pot, if our mind is the receptacle listening, it shouldn't be upside down or with a lid on. That means we shouldn't be closed. The mind, it shouldn't be upside down or with a lid on. That means we shouldn't be closed. The mind should be open to new ideas, and it shouldn't be just full up with its own ideas. So just as empty pot is not being able to pot. The second one is that the pot shouldn't be dirty. That means that the giving the teaching shouldn't have some sort of delusion or bad motivation. There's many possibilities. We could be just listening and acquiring knowledge for our own intellectual reputation, not to actually apply. The important thing is to listen to the teachings as if it's personal advice, not just theoretical, not just acquiring more knowledge, which is really what happens at the university level. We're actually acquiring knowledge to get a degree, to get a qualification, to get a good reputation and also a good job. So the motivation for listening to the teachings should be pure, not to have personal benefit, not to improve our material wealth and so on, but to find out something that will benefit us and benefit others. We're looking to improve our minds. The last one is the pot should be not have a hole, not be leaking. So that means high and good concentration to when we're listening or reading, because listening includes reading, so we can retain what was said. Incredibly, in the time of the Buddha's teachings, all those teachings were actually memorized and not written down until several hundred years after the Buddha's passing. There was groups of disciples who were allocated the job of remembering certain sutras, just memorizing them and then passing their knowledge of that memory on to others. Fortunately, we now have so many ways lamrim is based. So this is the first lamrim teaching. And give the name of the text on which the lamrim is based. So this is the first lamrim teaching, the author, the year, and so on. This is just a bit of detail. I'm not trying to catch you up or anything, but remember Lama Tsongkhapa, sorry, not Lama Tsongkhapa, Atisha, Lama Atisha, the great Indian master, travelled to Tibet and taught a text called Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. And that was the very first condensed, concise way of consolidating the Buddha's teachings into something that was able to be well understood. So that's Lama Atisha in Tibet, and it was in the 11th century. Not that that's important, but gives you some idea when things happen. And so Lama Atisha, an Indian travelling to Tibet, and also from the tradition, what they call the Nalanda tradition, the great monastery in Tibet, in India, northern India, it was called Nalanda, the centre of all Buddhist learning. And so some great teachers, such as Atisha, travelled around to different countries, including Tibet, and spread the Nalanda teachings, which was taught in Sanskrit, and so that those teachings were translated into Tibetan, and now the Tibetan language has. So last one, what did the Buddha see when he escaped from the palace to the outside world? So this is just a little bit of the life story of the Buddha, which we had a look at last week. So a very privileged life, growing up in the Shakya clan, northern India, and he was the son of a king, and the king had great hopes for the Buddha to be the next king, and so he insisted that he stay in the palace and doesn't get any ideas to wander, and so he kept him very strictly with everything he wanted. He had, married and great luxury, everything he wanted, every comfort. But the Buddha wanted to see what was happening, and so he escaped one day, went outside into the town, and he saw a sick person. He saw a beggar, someone very old, and a corpse, someone who died. Basically, old age, sickness, and death, things that he'd never seen in the palace, that he's been protected from. So he saw suffering. And so and then he saw an ascetic, a holy man who'd given all the comforts of, and just wandering, begging, for going from place to place, a sadhu, they call it in India. There's still sadhus that go around in India, beg and just live on the streets. So what they're doing, they're regarded as holy people. By giving up comfort, they're looking for discovering wisdom. By depriving their bodies, they think that will give some sort of revelation, truth. So the Buddha decided he'd join them, much to his father's disappointment. And for many years, was it 5 or 6 years, quite a few years, lived with these ascetics, these holy men, and he almost died because he was depriving his body from food, and became incredibly weak, almost died, and he had decided that this was actually not revealing any particular truth. In fact, he decided that his body was suffering and his mind was not benefiting. And as he was sitting down under the Bodhi tree, I think it was a woman who worked in a dairy brought him some yogurt, curd, and he drank the yogurt. His body responded, and his mind became clear, and he decided that the way of asceticism was misguided, and that by looking after the body but not overindulging the body, the middle way was the way to help to progress, not to deprive the body of what it is, give it the basic food so that his mind could be used to study teaching and to meditate, which is what he did under the Bodhi tree. meditated and became enlightened under the Bodhi tree. All right, so enough of that, a bit too much for that actually. Let's move on. The 3 scopes of practice. So we're looking today at this classification of different ways or different approaches to the Buddha's teachings. They call them 3 scopes, scopes being the scope of our mind, how wide our mind is. And so basically there's 3 possible ways that a student of Buddhist teachings can approach the teachings. And the beginner will use ways that a student of Buddhist teachings can approach the teachings. And the beginner will usually be what they call the student of small scope or initial scope. So this is the initial scope. Then there's the next scope is the scope of intermediate beings who've got more capacity, have progressed more along the path, and the being of higher scope, which is the highest level that can be practiced in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So these 3 scopes of beings can be, they actually could be in our mind at the same time. First scope of being is actually looking some immediate physical relief, maybe something. Just to quote Lama Zopa, he says, if a person is practicing Buddhism, studying Buddhism, just for more happiness in this life, to improve our jobs, our material wealth, and give us more pleasure in this life, he said, that's not actually practicing Buddhism. So the very minimum level of practice is the being of small scope, who is trying to move from the suffering of this life, can see that this life is not enough, is not what satisfying, not ultimately satisfying. And so what they're doing, the being of initial scope, is trying to create the causes, find out what is needed for a better next life, where we can actually continue to progress with the mind and eventually move towards the higher levels of practice. So in fact, that being of small scope is still working at the thinking that the immediate, what we've got, the immediate pleasures, short-term pleasures, is still something that we want. We're not actually seeing beyond what they call cyclic existence, the dissatisfaction of the material world that we're living in. That's the 3 types of suffering, which we mentioned last week. Yeah, the 3 types of suffering. The first type of suffering is what the Buddha saw, and wrong ways of thinking in our minds. And because we have wrong ways of thinking, we act on those wrong ways. We act on anger, we act on attachment, we act on miserliness. And so that's going to have a cause. That creates the cause. Because those actions are not based on wisdom, not good actions, then they're going to cause more suffering. And that involves concepts of karma. So these preliminary contemplations, Rabina's quite good on this. I've gave you the reference there on the notes, page 32. Now she likens it to primary school, where we have to learn the basics to be able to move on to high school and university. And so these to actually even begin primary school, we need to have some sort of contemplate, some sort of realizations. First thing is some understanding of what mind is in the Buddhist teachings, and we actually looked at this when we did mind and its potential. If you have joined us when we did the first module, mind and its potential, basically to review, the Buddhist concept of mind is that it's non-material. It exists, but it's not material. So the mind is not the brain. The brain is, it sits in the brain, the human brain. So the mind is like a condition of having a human brain. but they're different things. The brain came from the parents, physical cause. The mind came from previous moments of mind. Previous moments of mind goes right back to the womb, back to conception, and back to previous lives. We came into the womb from previous lives. So this idea of continuity of mind, important, and it's a hard one to grasp, and it's not something that is Lamrim and the lamrim says that these are important preliminary concepts. Then it could take a long time for us to actually accept, particularly when we're brought up in a very materialistic, science-based view of the world. So most medical doctors and scientists are materialists and think that there's only the body. It's from what I can understand anyway. They think that the mind and the brain are the same thing. There are many problems with that assumption, many problems. In fact, I think I did go to a conference once with a psychiatrist, a philosopher, and the Dalai Lama, and they were talking about the meaning of mind. Of course, the Dalai Lama had perfect definitions, very good definitions of mind, and the others, the philosopher didn't really have a definition, and neither did the neuroscientist. So the neuroscientist actually, as a brain scientist, he said the more he operates on the brain physically as a doctor, the less obvious it is that the mind is the brain. He said the more questions arise, and it's just he disputes the philosopher's contention that science just needs to do more work on looking at the brain, and it all wouldn't realise that the brain is the mind. The neuroscience totally disagreed. He said, no, as a person working with the brain, there's more questions arise, and there's obviously the mind is not the brain. And the philosopher obviously couldn't really, because the philosopher's working from a theory, and so the theory that just a matter of science moving along, the scientist said, no, it's not true. So it was very good to actually see this common sort of view of science that it's going to explain everything in terms of material things. View of science that it's going to explain everything in terms of material things. Alan Marsh is very good at debunking what he calls radical materialists. So I won't get to. So basically, the mind exists. It's not the brain, but it's the brain is a condition of having a human mind. The next one is having a qualified spiritual teacher. So this is again something very, very foreign to Western culture. Spiritual teacher. It's not the idea of a guru. Is just not something that we're brought up with. So it can take a long time to see the importance. I think Rabina says, or one of the teachings for the readings, they give the example of if you've got all these parts. Say you've got a Rolls Royce and it's all in parts. It's a wonderful car, but you don't have any instructions to how to put it together. So a little bit like the Buddhist teaching is so incredibly vast and profound, but unless we have some guidance on how to put those teachings together, it's very difficult to make progress. In fact, we can't. So not going to, there's a whole module on the spiritual teacher coming up, so just leave that aside. But there is, the lamrim taught traditionally always emphasizes one of the first topics, the importance of the spiritual teacher. But in our culture, it takes a lot of study and contemplation to accept that. The next one is appreciating our human life. So this is another thing that may not be obvious. I think for me, just physically going from our incredibly wealthy material world here in Australia and travelling as we can nowadays to third world countries, countries where there is war, famine, incredible hardship, dictatorship, So that's on a very physical level. We can the benefit of traveling, particularly if you're younger people, best education, fantastic education, and so you can actually appreciate when you come back how amazingly fortunate our physical life is here. So with this topic, appreciate our human life, our physical location, but we're also appreciating we are in a human form. And that implies that we could be in another form. We could be an animal, which is the most obvious. We can actually see animal. And the animals we see in our domestic situation are usually very well looked after. But if you look closely, these animals are, although they have enough to eat and drink, they're incredibly dumb. They're lacking intelligence. They can't understand anything. They can learn perhaps a habit, but just think of if they have the Buddha himself talking to them and giving teachings, they have no idea what they're talking about, what's being taught. But then we go from the domestic animals to the wild animals who are constantly in fear of being eaten, constantly looking for food, constantly in hot or cold, suffering hot or cold. So that realm, particularly the sea realm, the fish, always big fish eating the little ones and so on. So that's a very obvious example of another possibility. Why could we could have been born into that, the Buddhist teachings say. Then the other part of the lamrim says that there are invisible realms as well that are even worse. These spirit realms as well that are even worse. These spirit realms, one's called hungry ghosts. Some people with special clairvoyance can actually see hungry ghosts, I'm told. It's what it says in the lamrim. These beings can't ever get enough food or drink. They're in this constant state of starvation, and when they do get food or drink, they can't swallow it. There's problem digesting the food. So that's called the hungry ghost realm. And then there is below that what they call the hell realms. Now these are not physical places. Lama Yeshe call the hell realms. Now these are not physical places. Lama Yeshe, I remember in one of the courses I attended, it was asked, where are the hell realms? And he said, they're in this tent, talking to the audience. So he's referring to that they're in people's minds. There's no physical hell realm. But because of misdeeds, wrong ways of thinking, acting, have actually created the momentum in their mind to create these worlds where there is constant suffering. So there's hot hells where there's constant fire, cold hells, constant cold, and others even more frightful. So these, if you do a lamrim course, the one that's the one produced by presented by the FPMT organisation, like Copan, the Copan course, the first 2 weeks of the month-long course are usually looking at these suffering existences, suffering realms. So the point of studying these lower realms are to appreciate the realm that we're in, which is said to be extremely hard to find. Really, the number of beings in the lower realms are infinitely greater than those in the human realm. So this human life we've got, against all odds, is extremely rare and difficult to find again in the future. So we meditate on that together with how fragile it is. So that's the meditation we're doing later tonight. The fragility of our life, the certainty that it will end, the uncertainty of when it will end, and what the only thing that can help life is our state of mind. The practices, the meditations, the calm, positive influences we've put on our minds during our life. So those three things: good preliminary contemplations in mind. So these, if you look down at the 10 on virtues, His Holiness just listed them there. You'll see that the first 3 are actions of body, killing other beings, stealing, sexual misconduct. The next 4 are actions of speech, lying, divisive speech, harsh words, idle talk. And the last 3 are actions of mind, covetousness, what we're thinking, jealousy, malice, that's wrong, ill will towards others. And the last one, wrong views. So thinking that, an eye for an eye, or thinking that animal sacrifices will produce, a good result. So these actions we try to avoid, and the opposite, as much as possible, we try to, like the opposite of killing would be to save lives. The opposite of stealing would be generosity. So this very much is the focus of what's called the Pali tradition. That's the Theravadan practice of Buddhism. The good conduct, good ethical conduct. So this is extremely important to have good ethical conduct, to be able to actually progress to higher levels of practice. And so we, as much as possible, give up the negative action and pleasures which involve attachment. Something is very much emphasized in Lama Yeshe's teachings, that basically everything that causes suffering in this life is attachment, the attached mind. So that's, as much as possible, reducing attachment during our life. Often, just more formally said, developing a sense of renunciation. So the initial level of practitioner is motivated by, I've mentioned there, fear and faith. The fear is getting negative consequence from wrong conduct, from conduct that's motivated by the 10 non-virtue, and understanding that they're all going to have imprints on our mind, all our actions of body, speech and mind, and they will reap consequences, if not in this life, in later life. So just realizing that, watching our conduct so that we don't have to suffer the consequences of them. What goes around comes around. So with that awareness, we're watching very carefully. And then faith in the teaching of that there will be consequences, and faith in cause and effect. It's not blind faith, not just based on the texts and the teachers, but using our reasoning to see that the faith is based on good reasoning. So we don't want to make ourselves sick. So we realize that by eating too much fatty food, we're going to get fat and have medical consequences later. So we realize that we need to give up the habits that have actually caused us pain and suffering in the past. So this is some understanding of the law of cause and effect, and some understanding of the laws of karma using reasoning. So just looking down below at the bottom of the page there, page 2, the aim is to have a good aim of following the teaching, as much as possible avoiding negative action, as much as possible creating positive action, is to create causes for a fortunate rebirth, ideally a perfect human rebirth, where we can actually continue our practice. So to do this, meditations, appreciating human life, meditating on the certainty that we're going to die and the uncertainty of the time of death, and how everything, including the things that we're crave for in this life, including our own body, is that we spend so much time and money protecting, we're going to have to leave at the time of death. So everything, even our most treasured loved ones, we have to at the time of death, impermanence. Having this knowledge of letting the cause of impermanence, not grasping, having a more relaxed, easier journey through the life. So the meditations are those different. So there's different meditations we can do. The one we're doing on death and perfect human rebirth is just one. We can do that later. Understanding cause and effect. And now, top of page 3, this very interesting teaching given by the Dalai Lama in the book that I've put on the reading list. I always forget the name. I think it's called Practicing the Path, but just check the reading list. Anyway, I've given the page number, but not actually the book itself. It's on the reading list. So His Holiness is sort of looking at this traditional lower scope, medium scope, higher scope, teaching it in terms of Westerners. And when I read this, I thought this is just certainly the way I encountered Buddhism. I certainly didn't come in from the idea of looking for a guru and so on. Though His Holiness, I just quote a little bit of it. I grew up in a belief where there's no strong tradition of believing in rebirth, and that's basically the West, probably comes to Buddhism with the motivation simply to improve our quality of life. At the moment, your ordinary initial level individuals would like to experience less stress, less anger, better relationship, improved health, more peace of mind in this life. So you look to Buddha's teaching as a way to that end. Okay, so that's basically being very practical. It's not actually qualified as a spiritual path at that stage, but then he goes on to say from that initial motivation, we can improve, learn more about the teachings and improve our motivation. So I think probably most of the people who went to Kopan when I did in Nepal, it's like sort of kind of the hippie trail in the 80s, early 80s, was to actually, so there seems to be something in the teachings and the application of the teachings. So then we look at beyond the just being a better person and can actually eliminate all suffering, all dissatisfaction completely. And so we can purify to an unlimited extent this mind, this mind we have. So as we think more about them, become more convinced using our reasoning over years, and His Holiness has said, usually sort of 5 or 10 years, if you've been doing practices for 5 or 10 years, and then look back. If there's no improvement, maybe you need to try something else. He actually has said that, maybe something other tradition is better. But if you start to notice that the mind is progressing and improving, then keep going. You become aware of the dangers of this cyclic existence, this where we are at the moment, and you just so the Theravadan tradition, which hasn't always been called Theravadan, but the tradition of right conduct and wanting to achieve liberation, total liberation of all suffering, purification of the mind. So the second of them, so that although all phenomena, including ourselves, appear to have a concrete existence, then if we look closely and examine carefully, there is no inherent existence. There is no inherent existence to be found in the self or in external phenomena. So the three turnings of the wheel cover all the Buddhist teachings, the first turning the wheel covers basically the being of initial scope or lower scope. Since its orientation that I want to do is quite long, it might be good to just take a pause and then introduce the meditation. Excuse me, I'll just have a sip. And I'll just quickly look over my notes and see if there's something I need to elaborate a bit more on, because I've skimmed through these notes quite quickly. So again, the Four Noble Truths is another topic that we come back to in another module and spend the whole 4 weeks on the Four Noble Truths. But just what they, I'll just introduce what they are. So the Four Noble Truths is the truth that our current situation is a situation where we do suffer. But just like the teaching that the Buddha showed us when he went from the palace and saw what was happening in the real world, old age, sickness and death and so on. The first thing is to acknowledge that we do suffer, that there is something wrong, and although we might not be physically ill, but there might be, if we go to an expert, then that expert might be able to do some special medical tests and find that actually something very wrong. And if we don't take action, we could actually get very sick. So Rabina puts it quite well in her transcript of teaching that the first thing is to find out that you have an illness. And she says, and we find out that although in Western medical terms, we appear to be mentally well, the bar is so low in the Western medical science of what's mentally well compared to the Buddha, or a lot of mental health. When we compare ourselves to what we could become, when compared to the state of an enlightened being. So that first step is to find out that something is wrong and needs to be fixed. Second noble truth is that there are actually reasons for the illness we have. Basically, it's in a shorthand way, it says we have delusions, and we also have karma, which is the effect of our wrong actions. We think mistakenly, we have wrong ways of thinking, we act on the wrong ways of thinking, and that causes us to have bad consequences and create more wrong ways of thinking and acting and doing and saying. So the causes are there. So if there's a cause, the COVID virus, for example, and then there's a possibility of stopping the cause. So stopping that virus, that bacteria, from either killing it off or purifying it so it can't actually cause any harm. So the third noble truth says that there is a cause, and we can actually, if we tackle the cause, then we can stop the effect. So that's cessation. And how do you do that? Follow the path. So the fourth noble truth is actually telling us the cure. But we start with the first noble truth, saying, first of all, find out and admit that you have a fault, and then you can take steps to follow the cure, which is the path. And so the cause of all the problems are in the mind, and the cure, the way out, is also in the mind. Okay, so with the just I'll just read a few words from Lama Zopa's teaching on why it's really important to do some death awareness meditation, because it seems like, from our Western point of view, why would you want to think about something so unpleasant as death? So when you go to an intensive lamrim course, such as the Kopan course, the first week or two is almost all on the First Noble Truth, the existence of suffering, and also the awareness of death awareness. So, quoting Lama Zopa, the thought of death makes us incredibly alert. If we're walking through a forest where there are tigers, our eyes would be wide open all the time. We wouldn't daydream at all. We'd think only about the tiger and be watching and listening carefully, fearful of every noise or movement. The tiger in the forest is our death, which can pounce at any moment. If we could see this, we would always be mindful. We would have no problems concentrating. All the lamrim topics would not only make perfect sense, but would be protection, not from death, but from a miserable death and a terrible rebirth. So just as we could never forget the tiger hidden in the bushes, we should never forget the death hanging over us. In that way, all hindrances to our Dhamma practice will drop away easily and completely. Remembering death makes us reassess our life and change our priorities. We no longer need the objects of the eight worldly dharmas, of the distractions of this situation, more sense pleasures, etc. So remembering death makes us reassess our life and change our priorities. Whether we receive comfort or not is irrelevant, in the same way that beautiful flowers in the forest are irrelevant because of the time, purifying our mind and creating merit to ensure a good merit. All that matters is these things. So if you've got this constant awareness of death, puts an edge on every moment, and having an edge with the awareness of, and we look exactly what that means. We've got, we can listen, we've got our faculties, we're born in a place where we have access to the teachings, incredible Buddhist teaching. 100 years ago, wouldn't be able to find any teachings on Buddhism in Australia. So this incredible conjunction of good fortune, of events, we've got time, some leisure time, and we've been born with some interest in the teachings. That shows that we've cultivated the causes in previous existences. We've done some practice before. We've cultivated our mind so that we're receptive to the Buddha's teaching. So this is the appreciating the human life and the circumstances of our human life. We put that together with death awareness, and it helps us to realize that we need to make the most of what time we've got. All right. So let's just start the meditation, and we'll, as always, we'll just spend a minute or two doing some mindfulness, breath awareness to calm the mind. Get comfortable. Just coming to the breath, allowing the mind to settle. A few moments just moving, watching the movement of the body with the breath. So the first part of our inevitability that we'll have to leave this body at a certain time, acknowledging that. So knowing this, like living next to a river that is rising with floodwaters towards our house, doing nothing is not an option. Our house, doing nothing is not an option. The river is rising and will soon be flooded. Holding that thought of the certainty and that time is getting closer, minute by minute, second by second, acknowledging the truth, feeling the truth. The second point is that time of our death is uncertain. There are so many causes that could cause our death, so many causes to end our life that could happen, and so few causes sustaining life. It's amazing we're still alive. Just think, external causes, natural disasters, accidents, not just road accidents, but accidents at home, aircraft, taking wrong medicines, misadventure like poisoning and murders, train crashes, internal causes of death. Our body, we'll have to leave all we have, all we treasure, all we hold on to. The only thing that we take to the next life is our mind, our subtle mind. And it imprints on our subtle mind. The Dharma practice we've done, our development of compassion, wisdom, the good heart, purification, we can take to the next life. Time of death, our state of mind is crucial. die with a positive mind, we can have an auspicious next life and continue our practice. If we die with regret, attachment, negative state of mind, we can be reborn in a place where we can no longer practice, a place of suffering. So given those 3 points of certainty of death, uncertainty of time of death, all that can help is our state of mind. We can move to the second meditation on appreciating this human life that we have now. We are born into this human body with a human brain, extraordinarily rare. Being born human means we've accumulated an enormous amount of good karma in the past. We have our faculties, we can listen, reason. We're born in a peaceful country with freedom, freedom of religious practice, belief, freedom of movement. We have access to the teaching, born in a country where the Buddhist teachings exist, in a language we understand. We have centres, qualified teachers teaching the Dharma, the Buddhist teaching, in a language we understand. Qualified teachers spent their life studying the Dharma, where we can join others, like-minded students with the same interests. Access to resources in print form, resources in print form, digital form, internet. The time, leisure time to study Dharma and practice. We don't have to spend our entire life earning enough to eat, survive, developing our minds, an interest in the Buddhist teachings, a connection. As soon as we hear the teachings, they make an impact in our life. We're not completely overwhelmed by attachment to material world. In short, we have this extraordinarily precious human existence. The conclusion now is that we have a very precious opportunity with the human body, though hard to obtain and to get again. We have this fragile human body that could end at any moment, the human life. Certainty that we will have to leave the human body, uncertainty of the time. The only thing that will help at the end of this life is our mental qualities. Positive mental qualities, compassion, wisdom. So we can now just dedicate any positive merit from this meditation, tonight's teachings, or the positive meditations we've done in the past, we'll do in the future. The imprints on our mind, positive imprints. towards the development of wish to progress along the path to enlightenment, create the causes of positive rebirth in the next life, ultimately with the aim of developing our Buddha potential and becoming a fully enlightened being to help other beings to become enlightened. So finally, just reading Lama Zopa's special dedication for the pandemic. However many sick sentient beings there are, may they quickly be freed from all sickness. May all sickness without exception of transmigrating beings never occur again. Due to all these merits collected by me, all the Buddhas, and all sentient beings, may all wars, sickness, famine, torture, poverty, economic problems in the world, all dangers of earth, water, fire, and wind be pacified immediately. May perfect peace and happiness prevail in everyone's hearts and lives. May the Buddha Dharma last for a long time. May sentient beings in this world meet the Buddha Dharma and achieve enlightenment as quickly as possible. Dedicating to that. So that's it for tonight. Thanks so much for being there. Hopefully we've managed to keep streaming and stay well. And I look forward to seeing you next week, same time. And just a reminder, if you could just let me know whether you would like to continue with the live stream after Vajrayana Institute opens 1st of November, or whether you'll be attending in person. Just let me know what your preferences are to have live teaching, which we will be having, but whether we should continue on with the YouTube videos. So hopefully I think we will be able to do that. Okay, take care and see you next week.